Last week I travelled to Washington to interview author, journalist and public intellectual Christopher Hitchens. The interview's in two parts. We'll screen it over the next two nights. Hitchens was diagnosed with cancer earlier this year while on tour promoting his memoir, Hitch 22. Tonight's interview deals with how he responded to the illness and whether facing death has softened his fierce atheism or caused him to modify his belief that religion poisons everything. Here's the first of our two-part special. It's very good to see you.
Tony, nice for you to come to DC.
It's a pleasure to be here, and although the circumstances aren't great, and the question that most people are going to want to know is, how are you at the moment? How are you feeling?
If this had been yesterday, I was wondering, in fact, yesterday, if I could do this today. That's because I've just had a kill or cure dose of venom cocktail mainlined into me, and in the first few days after that, you feel very compromised, very nauseated, very weak, very demoralized. And that's on top of knowing why you have to have it, which is I have a tumor in my esophagus, which has spread. So it's called stage 4. The thing about stage 4 is there is no stage 5. So I'm finding out how this can be managed, whether I can live with it, whether it can be, I doubt curable. I think the word curable doesn't really apply, but it can be treatable. What kind of life and how much of it I have is my big preoccupation now.
Are the treatments working? Do you know?
Well, the tumors were shrinking with the first round, but they've stopped doing that. They're having to try something a bit stronger now, and I may be a candidate for radiation therapy, which is a very tough thing. You've got to be quite strong for it. I have quite a decent constitution in spite of all my abuse of it and my advanced years. I'm still quite robust. But the combination
we wouldn't say advanced years.
Chemo, well, I'm in my 60s now. I finally look it, I think. People, until I was 60, would always say they thought I looked younger, which I think, without flattering myself, I did, but I think I certainly have, as George Orwell says people do after a certain age, the face they deserve.
So are you actually up for a long interview about life, death, the universe and everything?
Oh yes, I mean, my interest in all the large questions hasn't dimmed at all. In fact, it's quite a good way of concentrating the mind.
You've talked and you've written about the cancer right from the beginning, and people have been following your account as you put out your monthly pieces in Vanity Fair. And you've talked about crossing a border into the land of malady. What is that like?
Well, for me personally, it was a bit like being deported, in that I woke up in New York, having gone to bed feeling more or less okay, during a very grueling book tour, and I woke in the morning thinking I was actually dying. The whole liquid sac, the pericardium as it's called, around my heart had just filled up. It was as if my whole chest cavity had been crammed with wet cement. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. And I managed to call the emergency services, and these wonderful New Yorkers arrived, but so very heavily armed and with sort of cuffs and torches and boots. And I remember thinking idly as they loaded me into the ambulance, why do they need all this for one stricken civilian? It was a bit like being arrested and deported. And in fact, in their kindly way, they were escorting me across the frontier from the land of the well into the land of the very ill indeed. And well, it's not a transition you can ever forget making. And of course, it's not one you can ever fully make back again either. I mean, however well I respond to treatment, I'll never be able to feel the way I did the day before.
What does it actually mean for your day-to-day life? Because we see you continually out there writing, doing interviews like this, taking on, as you said, lectures, debates. I mean, how hard is it to actually get yourself out of bed in the morning to continue the life of a public intellectual?
Well, I don't get out of bed much before 11 these days, and I go to bed much earlier than I did. So I can do about half, I suppose, of what I was doing before. I can I can continue to write as well. That's my big test. There were a couple of days when I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to write, and that terrified me very much, because being a writer is what I am rather than what I do. It's my, without sounding, I hope, too affected, it is my raison d'etre, and as well as being terrified of the thought that I wouldn't be able to do what I'm supposed to do, I was afraid that it would diminish my will to live. I mean, what would I be doing if I couldn't write? But that, fortunately, hasn't proved to be the case, and I can read any day, and I still read a lot, and I can write any day, but much more slowly and fewer words.
Being a writer, you actually personified or personalised the cancer. You call it a blind, emotionless being. You know, that is a pathetic fallacy. You've acknowledged that yourself, but does it feel like that you've been invaded by something?
Well, obviously it can't have emotions, and as far as we know it can't see. It is a being. The thing is, it can't have a life of its own, but it is an alien, and it is alive as long as I am. Its only purpose is to kill me. It's a self-destructive alien. It's like the absolute negation for, but is purposed to encompass your death. And keeping company with this is a great preoccupation. Once you think about it like that, it's hard to unthink it.
How do you feel about the people who are praying for you? Because there are some who are praying for you to go to hell. There are some, many more, in fact, who are praying for you to be cured, and some who are praying for you to be converted.
That's right, or converted and cured, to be fair to them. Well, to the people who pray for me to not only have an agonizing death, but then be reborn, to have an agonizing and horrible eternal life of torture, I say, well, good on you. See you there, sort of thing. I don't feel I'm very much obliged to engage with them. For the people who ostensibly wish me well or are worried about my immortal soul, I say I take it kindly. I mean, it's a show of concern. It's a show of solidarity, which is a very important word to me. It's a kindness. If it doesn't do any good, and I'm sure it doesn't really do any harm. The only objection I have is one I touched on a moment ago, which is, it seems to me a bit crass to be trying to talk to people about conversion when you know they're ill. The whole idea of hovering over a sick person who's worried and perhaps in discomfort and saying now's the time to reconsider strikes me as opportunist at the very best, and has a very bad history in the past. There have been false claims made by people who, bothered Thomas Paine while he was dying, or and published false reports later that he'd recanted on his deathbed. Even tried that on Charles Darwin. There was an attempt at a false story of that kind. This, I think, is shameful, and to the extent that it reminds me of that, I resent it.
The New York Times says your illness has actually spurred one of the most heated discussions that they can remember of belief, religion, and immortality. It's almost inevitable, isn't it, when a famous atheist faces death, that this will happen?
Yes. Yes, it's an occasion, and people never tire of saying as they do. Many people write to me or email me, including perfect strangers, readers, well-wishers, sometimes former students or people who know me a little bit. They all, one way or another, make the point that, okay, I won't pray for you, don't worry, or perhaps you don't mind if I do. They all do it as if they're doing it for the first time. It's rather touching.